Welcome to another episode of the Homegirl Factor Podcast. This month, we are shining a light on something that is deeply impacting a lot of people: domestic violence and the emotional wounds that often come with it. And today, we are talking about the different types of domestic violences, how they affect us physically and emotionally, and most importantly, how to begin the process of healing and reclaiming peace of pain. Joining me today is Donna, a passionate advocate for trauma and recovery and emotional wellness. Together, we'll explore how early attachment wounds can shape our adult relationships and what we can do to break free of the cycle of pain. Donna is passionate about providing an empathetic and supportive environment for all patients. She works with each patient to develop evidence-based, patient-centered, holistic plan to promote mental wellness. Treatment plans include medical management, psychoeducation, lifestyle modification, and supported therapy to target the symptoms that are impacting the patient's life. She treats children and adults with symptoms related to anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, OCD, and mood disorder. Welcome, my friend, Donna. Welcome to the Homegirl Factor Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. How do you define domestic violence beyond what most people imagine? Is it like physical harm or?
So, you know what? Most people think when you say the words domestic violence that that's what it is. It's just physical harm from one person to another. But honestly, it is a little more than that. The overall description of domestic violence would be a power imbalance in the relationship. One person, and it often is a male over a female, but it's not always. It can be in same-sex relationships. It can even be female to male. It's not necessarily just male to female, but there's an imbalance in power, and that can manifest physically, like you said. You know, there can be the physical violence, but also there's emotional abuse, where that could entail name calling or demeaning someone. It can also be keeping them isolated from other people, keeping them isolated from friends, family, supports, so that they don't have resources outside of the relationship. It can be sexual abuse, unwarranted, even in a marriage. Any unwanted or non-consensual sexual contact is sexual abuse. One that was new to me when I first got into this line of work was financial abuse. Yeah, financial abuse. So say one person controls all the finances. Say even if both partners are working, one partner has to turn over their income to the other partner. Or one partner isn't allowed to spend money without the other one knowing. You know, financially they're controlled.
Okay.
And then there's actually one more. There's digital abuse, which is now becoming a little bit more prevalent, where people are stalking you. Maybe there's a tracker on your phone or a tracker on your car, and limit where the person is allowed to go. So that's kind of a newer one.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Why do you think many victims don't realize they're in this cycle of abuse?
I think, you know, the analogy of like the lobster in the pot, where the lobster doesn't realize and then suddenly the pot gets hotter and hotter and hotter. A lot of times that's what happens in domestic violence, that the victim, I prefer the word survivor, but the victim doesn't realize what is happening because it's very slow and very subtle, and until suddenly they realize the relationship has changed dramatically.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would be the warning signs that someone would need to look out for?
So any type of controlling behavior, whether someone is, controlling your finances, controlling your movements, controlling who you are allowed to see or who you're allowed to have as your friends, any types of that type of behavior where it limits the person's autonomy and there's an imbalance in the power dynamic between the couple, where one person exerts control over the other.
So this thing about digital abuse, is that like a thing, What would you say about that?
Yeah, it's becoming more common where there, I know of somebody who the husband tracks the wife's activity online. Like, he knows all her passwords, so he monitors everything that she's allowed to post online. He monitors her phone, so it can be very limiting in what she's allowed to be able to do because he's overseeing everything.
Let's move into a little bit of the wounds and trauma
Sure.
wounds. The difference between trauma wounds and attachment wounds. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people know what trauma wounds are. So trauma wounds are the things that happen to us in our life that are not supposed to happen. Say you have a motor vehicle accident or a debilitating, sudden illness. Those are things that happen in your life that are kind of a one and done. They happened, they shouldn't have happened, and we kind of can know that there's a trauma related, but we can move past that. The attachment wounds are different. Those are things that should have happened in our life that didn't happen. So, for example, as a child, maybe there was some neglect. Maybe there was separation from a caregiver, or there was exposure to, say, substances when the child is younger, or they witnessed domestic violence. Those are all things that should not have happened to that child, but the part that didn't happen was the protection of the parent monitoring the safety of the child. All of those things leave that child feeling wounded, worthless, neglected. Those are attachment wounds then we bring into our adulthood.
Wow. All right. For someone listening who recognizes these patterns in themselves,
Sure.
What's the first step to heal?
So honestly, I think the very first step is to recognize what's happening, to realize that this is not a normal, mutually supportive relationship, that there is a power dynamic there. So that's a lot. A lot of people have a hard time with that. Just recognizing that there is an element of abuse that they're being subjected to.
Yeah. And how about let's talk a little bit about, because this is it's such an interesting subject to me, because you see people that are in this predicament and they're terrified. You know what I'm saying? They don't know what to do.
Correct. Correct.
So and they're afraid that even if the person doesn't know that they're speaking to someone, they're like holding back, or defending the person that is causing all the trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. That happens a lot, especially when somebody feels so isolated. They feel that nobody will understand, or they don't know who to confide in. They don't know who would be supportive. There's a real level of isolation there. So that's why the support is the most important thing. So family and friends, reaching out to somebody that you trust, even if it is a trusted coworker, or even your PCP, your medical provider, just to say there's something happening, and then that's the next step. What can I do? That person then has to be supportive. There's also professionals, obviously. There's therapists, there's psychiatrists. So a lot of times people don't know the difference. Therapists provide counseling. They can provide therapy. They help us to reframe, negative thought patterns, or they help us to understand the nuances of what's going on in the relationship. Psychiatry is a medical specialty where they can also diagnose and treat the mental illnesses, the anxiety, the depression that comes along with domestic violence. And also, if and it's not always the case, but some people require some medication. And it doesn't
Yeah.
even have to be forever. It can be short term. So psychiatry providers, which I'm a nurse practitioner, there's also psychiatrists who are MDs, they can provide medication as well as therapy. And then there also is support groups. Those are really, really important. Support groups are people that have been there, people that understand what's happening. They understand the walk. And some people say, well, I don't want to go to a support group. Everybody's going to look down on me. Everybody's going to have pity. But it's really not like that. It's empathy. It's understanding and support.
Yes. Very important.
Yeah.
Very important. How about like coping and grounding techniques or strategies that you could just like give us so people could kind of like, because sometimes we're home and we need to like figure things out before we get to a professional, right?
Yep.
So what would you say those tools would be?
So, oftentimes when we are subjected to an abusive situation, you notice your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases. Some people, their hands shake, they cry. These are very physical responses to the emotional situation that's happening. So there's a lot of different things we can do. You can do breath work. So there's a certain technique that I teach my patients called box breathing. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold that for 4 seconds. So while you're doing that, you're visualizing the shape of the box. It helps you to get your mind on something else, and the breathing itself helps to calm your body. So that's one.
Yeah.
You also want to make sure that you're breathing through your belly. We become really shallow breathers. We, breathe really rapidly and shallowly. Put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. And when you're breathing in, the goal is to make sure that your hand that's on your belly is the one that's rising. So as you're concentrating on making sure that breath is going all the way down to your belly, it helps to calm down. There's other ones. There's certain things. There's a good one that I teach is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And by the time you get all the way down the list, you've calmed down some. So those are some really good grounding techniques that you can do anywhere. No one has to be doing it.
Yeah. The box breathing reminds me of yoga and meditation. We're constantly using the tool of breathing. Breathing is that most basic thing that we can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget to breathe.
Correct.
So that's a really good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Correct.
So healing can be lonely at times. Why is having support from friends, therapy, or groups so important?
Well, when you're in a domestic violence situation, you feel alone. You feel like no one else is there to protect you, or no one else would understand. Just having someone who can even just sit with you, just offer that support, just offer that connection, that personal connection. It doesn't have to be a physical connection. Just to say, I'm here, I see you, I recognize that this is, a terrible situation that you're in. Not everybody can solve the problem. But just to know that there's somebody there that can support and that understands and will listen can be amazingly helpful. So it is really hard to open up to people, to trust, but it is probably the most important thing. The most important thing, so that the survivor feels like they are not alone and there is a future.
Yes. That definitely is so important.
Yeah.
How does self-forgiveness play a role in the healing process for the survivor?
So, once the survivor is even outside of the relationship, once they've removed themselves, a lot of times there's self-blame. They say, why did I stay so long? How could I be so stupid? How could I get myself into this situation? And a lot of times they're very hard on themselves. They're harder on themselves than even, anybody else would possibly be. But blaming yourself is not going to help you move forward. So self-forgiveness is actually the act of taking responsibility for your part. So it's not acknowledging your own responsibility, but it's saying that everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Everybody, nobody's perfect. Everyone makes a mistake, but I'm still a good person. I am okay. And I deserve to have a good life. I deserve to move forward. It's a little bit different than self-compassion. Compassion is treating yourself with kindness.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different. Self-forgiveness is understanding that everybody makes mistakes, but they deserve to be forgiven. Just like when you are a little child and you spill a glass of milk. It's a mistake. You forgive the child, you clean it up, and you move on. The same thing with self-forgiveness. You acknowledge that something happened, you made a mistake, and we can move on. But self-compassion, we don't want self-judgment. We don't need self-criticism. And it's really hard to do that. It's really difficult to do that. So that's another reason why support is so helpful, because oftentimes those negative comments, those negative thoughts, they just live in our minds. And we need somebody to counteract that, to say, no, you know, what happened to you was terrible, but you are not a bad person.
Exactly. Yeah. And those two things, self-forgiveness and compassion, we can use them in so many different areas of our lives.
100%.
Like, you know, it doesn't like specifically sit with just abuse, just us, like being aware of being compassionate with ourselves and
Yes.
moving forward, because we do put a lot of,
Yes.
of negative, you know, intonation. We do a lot of negative self-talk all the time, and we don't even realize
Right.
it. So it's important that we just, you know, try to figure it out and maneuver that. So I love those three elements: the self-kindness, compassion, common humanity, and mindfulness. Can you share how each helps with healing,
Sure.
like the self-kindness?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-kindness is something that is kind of, we give kindness to other people. You would treat other people more gently than you treat yourself. So say, you know, you were going through a difficult time, somebody comes to you and says, "How can I help you?" What can I do for you? You have to do that for yourself too. What do I need? Look inside and say, what do I need? Do I need, some time off just to gather my thoughts? Do I need to be able to talk to somebody and have them hear me? What do I need to at this moment? And give that to yourself. It's really hard. It's hard to treat yourself gently. Do I need an extra amount of sleep? Do I just need a good night's sleep? There's the other one. You said it. You said it already. Common humanity. We all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. So just letting yourself off the hook and understanding that you are a human being and you make a mistake, but it doesn't make you any better or worse than anybody else. And the big one is mindfulness, which you brought up. That's part of yoga. It's very much a part of being in the moment, being present, not stressing over the past, but also not worrying about the future. Just be in the moment, because that's the only thing that you can control at that time.
Yes. What message of hope would you like to leave for someone listening who might be struggling in silence right now?
I say that there are so many different things that you are probably saying to yourself. There's so many ways to beat yourself up, saying, I made a mistake. How did I do this? I don't deserve better. All of those negative thoughts, they're not true. Where's the proof? Where's the proof that you deserve to be treated poorly? Where's the proof that you are a bad person? That's not true. And it's really hard to turn those negative thoughts around, but it's so important. And one of the things I teach my patients is, for every negative thing you say about yourself, you have to say something positive about yourself. Because sometimes we don't even realize how terribly we treat ourselves. We don't even realize how many times we say, I am stupid. I am not a good person. I'm worthless. We don't even realize that. So just
Yes.
recognizing that is the first step. And
Yes.
then turning that around. No, I am a good person. I am kind. I deserve to be treated with respect. I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be treated gently. Those are really powerful statements, but we don't say them enough to ourselves. What I wanted to say is there are resources out there. There are definitely people out there that are ready and willing to help. There's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That is
Okay.
available. There's a
We'll put that one on the show notes for everyone.
Perfect. There is Hope for Recovery. That's a group that I have volunteered with for years. They offer classes. They offer intensives. They offer support groups. Everything is virtual. Most are free. So there you can, depending on what the issue is, whether it's domestic violence, it could be trauma, it could be interrelated. Sometimes people have substance abuse and trauma. There can be different things. So that is an option. Harbor House is our local domestic violence shelter here in Orlando. And then there's also Recovery Connections, which is a group that helps people with substance use and other issues. So there's many options. And then, of course, we have our local therapists and our psychiatry providers too. So There's a lot of options out there. It's just really hard when somebody's in the midst of it to realize that there are other things available.
They're so afraid, they're so vulnerable,
That's right.
Yes, that's correct.
Completely right.
But where can everyone find you? I know that you have a website and you provide services.
I do. I have a website. My practice is www.3, the number 3, pillars, PILLARS, MH for mental health.com. I am a psychiatry provider. I am a nurse practitioner, but I specialize in trauma. So I also provide trauma intensives, trauma therapy. And then I'd really like to start a support group around here locally. Maybe virtual, but maybe in person, because I think that I got so much out of the support group when I was in the situation that I really want to pay that back. And I think it's really needed. I'm not 100% sure there's enough local support of peers, because nobody understands better than somebody who's already walked in that walk.
Absolutely. You have a gift and you're sharing it. And that's usually it comes from us. When you're sharing a gift, it usually comes from something we've learned. So that's beautiful. Well, I'm so excited that you were here talking to us today. Thank you so much for showing up, using your voice, and making this possible today. Because mental health and violence is definitely a very important subject, and we are in the month.
Yes, we are. October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So thank you you for helping make this available to other people. And take care of yourselves. Everybody take care of yourselves.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The conversations shared on the Homegirl Factor podcast are based on real life experiences, personal stories, and opinions meant to inspire reflection and growth. We are not licensed therapists or medical professionals. Any and all discussions should not be taken as professional or medical advice. If you're struggling or need help, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional. Our goal is simply to share experiences, start conversations, and remind you that you are not alone on this journey.